Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to another week of At Ping. Let's get started. All our questions are written in this week, so I'm going to be reading them here. Hello, Mr. Pingree. I've enjoyed hearing your thoughts on things for years and need some guidance. Here's my question. When the term privateer was first used in the motocross industry, it was generally used to describe an individual who was racing on his own with little or no support. It's a borrowed term originally used in the nautical context to describe an independent, lone vessel that operated with autonomy. Similarly, in the motocross context, it typically connotated a guy pitting out of his dad's work truck, independently trying to make the motos. However, the term is now used to describe teams, which is oxymoronic in and of itself. These privateer teams come replete with tractor trailers, mechanics, multiple riders, suspension and engine tuners, and even salaried riders with no job except to train for racing. These teams are a far cry from the spirit of the term privateer. Have we, as an industry, distilled the phrase privateer to simply mean anything non-factory? I believe bestowing these multi-million-dollar teams with the privateer title is both confusing to those who are new to the sport and unfair to those who are true privateers. I believe the taxonomic naming system used within the industry needs an overhaul, and these teams should be referred to by some term other than privateer. What are your thoughts? Great question, and I would say I totally agree. We've definitely watered that down, and back in the day, it used to be pretty cut and dry. There wasn't a lot of support teams. You were either factory or you were pretty much doing it on your own. Maybe you had some help from a shop or a hop-up shop or something like that, but it was no race team. As the sport evolved through the 90s and with the onset of Pro Circuit and then all the other support teams that have come along, it has changed, and we haven't changed along with it. So my recommendation is this: privateer, anybody who's not getting help, they're doing it on their own. Yes, they have sponsors and they're getting maybe parts and discounts and stuff like that, but they're doing it on their own. The middle would be support team or support rider. These are either, maybe that's factory support, maybe that's just a private team, but they are funded through sponsors that are then paying riders' expenses, et cetera, et cetera. That isn't privateer, that is something in the middle. So what is it? I like the term support rider or support team, and then factory rider obviously at the other end of the spectrum. So I agree with you completely. I think that it's probably watered down pretty hard, and if we can maybe start using those terms, it'll help. So thanks for the letter, and let's see if we can make that change. I think another thing is if there's a factory team name attached to it, well, there you go. A guy working out of the back of his pickup truck or Sprinter isn't going to have a team name, right? All right, no name on this letter, so whoever you were, thanks, and keep them coming. Second one comes from Dan. Says, hi Ping, just wondering how important is correct technique when it comes to going fast on a motocross bike. It looks like all the pros have great style when watching the nationals nowadays. In the late 70s and 80s, when I was racing, there were guys with horrific styles that would absolutely kill it. Sure made it fun to watch. Is this pace just too fast now to get away with bad technique? Anyone you can recall that didn't care much for correct technique but could still drop the hammer? Cheers, mate. Regards, Dan. It's very important. Technique is very important. Speed without technique is very dangerous. And I think we're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing more significant injuries or more severe traumatic injuries from just exactly that. People able to jump things because the bikes are so good, they don't have nearly enough technique or talent to be jumping it. And that gets a lot of people in trouble. I think it's important to note too that I think style and technique are two different things. So there's riders who had bitchin' style, like Greg Albertine comes to mind. Always just elbows up, in the attack position, always looked great on the bike, but his technique in Supercross for a handful of years was not great, and it's put him on his head a lot. Conversely, if you look at, say, Kevin Windham, if you were picking apart his style, at times he rode with his elbows down a lot and he would sit a lot, which is not perfect style, but when it came to technique and body positioning, foot positioning, weighting the inside or outside of the bike or whatever. His technique was very good. So he might not have always had the best style at times, but his technique was good. And that's not to say all the time his style didn't look good. I mean, K-Dub was awesome. So was Albie. I don't mean any disrespect to those two guys, just that there's a difference between style and technique. VitalMX had kind of a funky style, elbows down, kind of rounded back and all curled up, but his technique was fantastic. So anyway, and I would say that in the old days, here's another difference. The bikes were the limiting factor. So 70s, even into 80s, early 80s, you had to really ride the bikes carefully or you'd break them. So now the bikes are not, their bikes are out of the equation, right? So it's the rider is the limiting factor. Can you, as fast as you can go, as hard as you can ride, as far as you can jump, the bike will take it. So now it's more on the rider, so they're pushing harder, and I think you can't get away with bad technique without a serious injury. Where in those old days, because even if your technique wasn't great, you could go for it and maybe be okay because you had to ride sort of within the limits of the bike. So thanks, Dan. Appreciate the question. And last one coming to you from Christian, says, hi, Ping. Love your show. I'm from living in Norway. I think that's just maybe a little mix. I'm from Norway and have raced motocross from 2002 to 2016 and ended my race days in the 125B class. But why is it there are so many classes at Loretta Lynn, and why do the guys race multiple classes? Is it normal in the US? Because here we only race one class, or sometimes people race two classes, that's it. Best regards, Christian. So you can only run two classes at Loretta Lynn's. That's it. And they do that for a reason. So it's a long trip. It's a big commitment to go back there. And if you have a DNF or a crash or something takes you out of one of the classes, it gives you an opportunity to make up for it in the other, which happens really regularly. And man, to go all the way back there, spend all that money, all that time, if you could only do one class and then to have it taken away by something like that would be pretty devastating. So that's why they do that. Why is there so many classes? Look, we got everything from 50 cc's to big bikes, novice to expert, youth classes, vet classes, stock and modified. I mean, there's just a ton of classes to get through. And in this week-long event, there are more classes they would like to do, but they just don't have time. It is packed full from sunup to sundown. They're doing motos all day long. So they've actually had to limit the number of classes they have, and they're still all, obviously, more people want to go than can. So that's just the way it is over here. I will say our amateur racing in general isn't great over here. In order to make more money, the promoters have just run as many classes as they can run. So now the gates are down to, not even close to a full gate. And guys are running 3-4 classes just to get enough track time because most of the motos are relatively short. Like 4 laps or in some cases. I mean, it's ridiculous. So I would like to see it be fewer classes, longer motos. I think that'd be better for everybody, except the promoter who's making money on every entry fee, right? So that's just sort of something that we're working through over here. I don't think that it's doing our riders any favors. I think that they would be better served doing some longer motos, not riding as many classes, but that cuts into the promoter's wallet, and therein lies the rub, right? So, hey, I appreciate the letters this week. Don't forget you can send videos or voice notes as well, but if you like to type it out, we'll read them and answer them too. So thanks for tuning in. See you guys next week.